Hello, welcome to everyone joining. We're going to start in just a minute. I'll give people a few seconds to. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending the 1619 Education Conference. As you're coming in, like Kendra has shared in the chat, please feel free to introduce yourself. We'd love to know where you're watching from, and we're thrilled that you are here for our first keynote presentation, The Legacy of Sugarcane, Healing the Wounds of History. I'm Donnalie Jamnah, one of the senior program managers on the Pulitzer Center's K-12 education team and the manager for our 1619 education programs. The Pulitzer Center champions the power of stories to make complex issues relevant and inspire action. We believe that journalism can be a key element for mobilizing society and that people and communities who actively engage with systemic challenges will find solutions together. We are proud to be an education partner for the 1619 project, and today I'm very honored to be in conversation with June and Angie Provost, who were featured on the Land of Our Fathers 1619 podcast episodes. June and Angie Provost are esteemed multi-generational sugarcane farmers situated in the enchanting, marshy landscapes of South Louisiana. This accomplished Black farming couple, recognized for their successes and resilience, have emerged as fervent advocates for farmers. Their journey, marked by triumphs and challenges, has propelled them into activism, particularly in championing the rights of socially disadvantaged groups, frequently victimized by unjust practices, resulting in a cycle of debt peonage and the disintegration of communities. The Provosts are dedicated to fostering a fair and equitable agricultural landscape for all, striving to create a future where exploitation gives way to empowerment. We're going to begin this event with a presentation from June and Angie before transitioning into a moderated conversation and audience Q&A. I just want to thank you both for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We are super excited to be here. Anytime that we get to share our story, our opinions, and our experience, we're honored. And that's exactly what Provost Farm is about. It's about honoring the legacy of our ancestors. June and I have created the Provost Farm Initiative, which is a cross-sector, multi-level program created by the Provost Farm Heritage Center and Community Garden, which is a nonprofit that we started in 2023, and Provost Farm LLC. Its purpose is to highlight and honor the legacy of Black sugarcane farmers in South Louisiana, while also raising public awareness about the challenges faced by Black farmers. We particularly highlight Black sugarcane farming in South Louisiana because sugarcane, if you're not aware, is the #1 lobby crop in the US. Just to give you a bit of our background, our roots stem from Senegal to Ghana. We sit 5 minutes to 10 minutes away from the very plantations where our ancestors were enslaved. We see the disparities between the Black descendants of those lands versus the white descendants and the outcomes of our livelihoods. We're very aware that Louisiana is often thought of as a French colonial state, but our cultures and our practices are very West African. And June and I are very passionate about telling the truth of that narrative. And so we want you to know how our roots and culture stem from our Santi roots as Black American farmers here in South Louisiana. And as was said before, you can hear our story in the podcast, the New York Times 1619 podcast. We've been featured in The Guardian as well, and Food and Wine magazine. We have some more up and coming publications, but not only do I encourage you to listen to the publications we are featured in, but to look up the numerous amounts of articles and writings about the issues of Black farmers. And we can go on to the next slide. So we love to say that we are more than just farmers. As I was saying before, we are multi-generational farm owners. Because if we don't acknowledge the farming ancestry of our people, we're not properly giving acknowledgement to our ancestors who have farmed long before they were forced across the Atlantic. And just to say through these pictures, as you can see, some of these are some pictures of our family and ourselves throughout the years. And I'll let June talk about his family history.
Yeah, so I'm Wenceslas Provost Jr. I go by the name of June. I'm a fourth-generation sugarcane farm owner. I began farming in 1994, and to be on the side of your family, you know, to have your dad and your brothers on tractors was the most incredible feeling that you can ever imagine. You know, my dad actually quit high school so he could farm with his father because, you know, my grandfather needed help. That first year, they made 600 tons of sugarcane. That following year, they doubled. They went to 1,200 tons. But if you fast forward to late 90s, early 2000s, we grew that farm operation to close to 5,000 acres, and we made 100,000 tons. But you fast forward a little bit more, that 5,000 acre farm dwindled down to 100 acres.
Exactly. And most of the 5,000 acre family farm is now being farmed by USDA county committeemen. And that's something that we should state, is that the egregious behavior often happens at the hands of the USDA. And I want to highlight in the pictures as well. At the top right, you'll see a picture of June's father and his mom and dad, their wedding picture. The picture of June walking through the cane field and the one right below, and me in the pink shirt at the school there, that was us when we went to Ghana. We were asked to go to Ghana in 2020, right before the pandemic hit, to work on a sugarcane farm. And that was a major highlight for us. And at the bottom is my grandmother and grandfather, who we recently lost about a month ago. But to say all of that, we're just trying to detail how agriculture is in our roots. It's in our DNA. You know, and it's something that we're extremely proud of. And we acknowledge the fact that it's not something that's often taught to us as Black folks, that you want to go out and farm, because it's always akin to sharecropping in the Jim Crow South, debt peonage, and the old chain gang system. But we want people to be aware that that is not the case for white farmers on average. And so it's incumbent upon us to know exactly what it is agriculture is about and how it's connected to our everyday lives. Next slide. One of the things that is so cool about, like, when you're finding out the roots about agriculture and foodways, is that you get to highlight the amazing culture that is developed through our communities. And throughout agriculture, it has been Black farmers and Black people that have mechanized the industry and made it better for everyone. There's an image here of Norbert Ryu, who invented the sugarcane boiler system, which ended the old Jamaican train system, where the old hot tea kettles enslaved people were picking up old, like the tea kettles that were so damaging and harmful to their bodies. Well, that later led to his invention becoming the sugar mill factories that are used today. And then there's Julian Leonard, who invented the automatic cane planter wagon and ended the laborious nature of hand planting sugarcane and using machinery to cultivate that crop. But not only is farming about the inventions that are there or the actual planting of crops, but it's also, again, it's about our foodways and our culture. And like I said, we realize that Louisiana is very West African in roots, from the way we dress up for Mardi Gras to what we eat at dinner. You know, there's a picture of jambalaya, which is the cousin to jollof. There's a picture of the beignets, which is akin to the African fried donut. And so some of these things are, you know, we don't necessarily, we're not necessarily taught all of these things in school or in public settings, but I think it's something that is extremely important in going forward in the future.
And I just want to go back to Julian Leonard. I actually became really good friends with his son. And when I say the automatic wagon changed the industry, it changed it completely. I mean, it just, from having guys to pulling by hand to where now it's done all just, you know, with technology, is you don't have to touch anything. And he was the reason behind it. Although he don't get the credit for it, he's the one that changed that industry.
Exactly. And not getting credit is something that is plaguing our communities as Black farmers. You'll find that Norbert Rioux, who was actually a third cousin to the famous painter Edgar Degas, Norbert Rioux, unlike Edgar Degas, died in poverty. Julian Leonard's family is still suffering from the fact that their farm was taken from them, although these men have done a great deal to advance our agricultural industry and economy, not only in Louisiana, but I think nationally and globally as well. And next slide. So oftentimes when you hear the plight of Black farmers, you'll hear these what we call scapegoating of what the real issues are, right? So you'll hear a lot about heirs property. You will hear a lot about us not farming in community. But one of the things that is not properly addressed is that many of us live in community down gravel roads next to our family members, right? And heirs property is not the main issue Black farmers are going out of business. The main issue that we are going out of business for are some things that are happening within the USDA and within the government that doesn't allow us for advancement. So that means the issue of statute of limitations, that you only have a certain amount of time to file your complaints of discrimination within the law. There's ECOA and RICO claim violations that are not heavily looked into. And the fact that folks don't even understand that the Commodity Credit Corporation is a department within the USDA and is one of the major commercial lenders in the United States. And the fact that we as Black Americans don't have access, fair and equal access to the Commodity Credit Corporation is something that is, it's unfair. It has to stop. And we have to properly acknowledge that that is a problem. And all of these issues, getting into defamation and slander, we're always labeled as lazy, willfully ignorant, irresponsible, but we know that's not the case. And a lot of this is perpetuated out of the fact that the issues of slavery were never repaired or properly addressed.
And get into defamation. I'm sure you probably all heard of the 1619 podcast and the farmer that pretty much slandered me to nothing. You know, we didn't hear that. We didn't know he was going to be on the podcast until the day it came out. So when we were sitting down just like we are now, and when we heard that, I just bust into tears, because I know that's their thinking, but to hear him come out and say that, you know, and this guy is a county committeeman who took, between me and Angie, took almost 800 acres of land from us, and then he's going on to the next black farmer and take a few hundred acres from him. So you have somebody like me who's a 4th-generation farmer. That's all I ever did do. We're losing land to young white farmers with no experience whatsoever. And the generational wealth that's lost in the black farming community is unreal. You know, right now we don't have any kids, but we could be turning this farm over to our nieces and nephews. We don't have that option now. But yet these white growers gonna be having their farms turned over and generational wealth for years to come.
Exactly. So one of the things, you know, that we often say is that we tell young students that Bill Gates is the largest farm landowner in the US. And if farming is good enough for Bill Gates, it is definitely good enough for our young brothers and sisters. And so we often tell folks to get involved in agriculture and think of it as a STEM job, as a pathway to entrepreneurship, and a pathway to turning the tides of history. So it's something that we often talk about within our settings in our communities, and we find it as a way of healing as well. And next slide. So cultivating a better future. So that is understanding our worth, as I said, reclaiming our past and building a better future. The value of Black farmers have added to the Louisiana experience throughout history, culture, and innovations are unmeasurable. To heal our communities, we must increase access to financial resources and support for Black farmers, such as grants, loans, and technical assistance programs. I cannot reiterate mostly the part about grants. As Black farmers, we need grants, we need donations, we need gifts, because we are starting behind the 8 ball, right? And so it is very important for folks to understand that access to capital and access to proper resources is a big hurdle for us. We need to promote and prioritize land ownership and land access for Black farmers. And when I say we, I actually mean the USDA. So I'm saying that the government, the body and department that was made as the People's Department, has to prioritize land ownership and land access for Black farmers. And there also has to be a fostering of partnerships and collaborations. And all of those things we think can happen with a broader voice and more acknowledgement to the real issues of the problem.
And kind of put it into perspective, in 1920, there was almost 1 million Black farmers. Today, we're less than 40,000. And when we talk about like financing, like as Black farmers, we don't have that opportunity as white farmers say they never retire, being 95 years old, still riding the headlands. Farming is tough occupation for everyone, but we have the worrisome of, will we even get a crop loan? And when you do get that crop loan, would it be enough? Will you have it on time? And we always call it a slow death. They give you enough to fail. And that is what's happening to Black farmers all across the country. I mean, in our local community, there was over 60 African-American farming families, not individuals, families, that are gone now. Gone. That was close to 40 to 50,000 acres that was farmed by Black farmers that are still in production, but just by white growers. So can you imagine the generational wealth that's lost in our area here and across the country?
And to give you a scope of that loss, so we sit maybe about, again, 5 minutes away from where June's family is from, which is right next to the plantation. And in that community where there was a great amount of Black farmers there, what we've seen or witnessed as these farmers have gone out of business is the infrastructure being lost to that community. And that's an example that I think is a national issue with Black farmers in terms of schools get shut down, stores get shut down, just the real building blocks and what we call real wealth for communities is lost. And next slide. In what was it, 2022, we ended up receiving winning and receiving the Public Justice Award. And this is a video that sort of recaps our story and gives you a highlight of some of the issues we're facing today. Can go ahead and press play.
It's not a better feeling in the world when you see what you planted and it pops out of the ground. In this area, at one time, there were 60 Black farms. Now that number is 4. And that's hard when you see that. I mean, for instance, like we used to farm this whole big old block here. This whole block we used to farm. I mean, it's difficult to see because it's, you know, it's not us on the property, and it's no reason why we shouldn't be on the property. No reason.
Farming for Black people is the oldest occupation for us in the United States. We went from slaves to sharecroppers, surviving the horrific laws of Jim Crow, all of these things that we have to endure.
Angie and June are just such wonderful, salt of the earth people. They ran this sugarcane farm in Iberia Parish, and they were some of the few remaining Black farmers in the country, and particularly in Louisiana. When June was working as a farmer, he won awards for the crop that he made every year.
You would think 5,000 acres, I would have been okay, but actually, I wasn't.
Within 10 or 15 years of award-winning crops, he was bankrupt, lost the farm, lost everything. And the other parties in this litigation said that he was just a bad farmer.
I mean, I contemplated suicide because I felt like I lost everything.
The loans that were involved in the Provost family and what ultimately led to the destruction of their business were FSA guaranteed crop loans.
For sugarcane, you need at least $600 to $800 per acre. So if you do that times 5,000 acres, I mean, you're looking at almost a $4 million crop loan that you need to farm that adequately.
The USDA was approving like just about $1 million or a little less for him.
Ultimately, the deck was stacked so much against them that there was almost no way that they could succeed. They didn't.
His USDA guaranteed lender was photocopying his signature to farm loans and lowering the approved amount. That's what was happening. But that's just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, we had dead cats placed in the tractor. We
Right.
had the windows blown out with a gun. We had center blocks, brand new center blocks placed in the middle of the field
Right.
when I started cutting the cane, and it just broke up all the blades. I mean, they wanted us out of farming by any means necessary. But, you know, we made the decision to fight back. So, and that's what we're going to do. And that's what we're doing.
Right.
Provost versus First Guarantee Bank was filed in federal district court in New Orleans. The original theory of the case was that the Provost family had been discriminated against in lending practices of the bank.
We did settle the case.
But there's still so much work to be done.
There's still so much. I mean, litigation is hard. I'll be the first to tell you, litigation is not easy.
When we finally got to the end of the case, we try to get Angie and June eligible for the American Rescue Plan provision that was going to forgive the loans to Black farmers. And ultimately that was going to be the success of the claim that they made. The American Rescue Plan provision for the loan forgiveness has been stayed by various federal courts. And so they have nothing.
Now, since they did these court cases with Miller, now everything is on hold.
You know, some of these judges should be ashamed of themselves because they know the history. It was white farmers who got 99.9% of the debt relief in the first place. And that's why we wound up in federal court, and that's why we turned to Congress to actually try to get the relief.
And, you know, I think it's very significant that they admitted to past discrimination, but they're not willing to admit to the ongoing filing of complaints, the ongoing discrimination. The reason why we tell our story is not because we want to see a system torn down, it's that we want to see the system better for us all.
Okay. So thank you all. We could go on to the next slide. We'll give you guys a bit of what we have been working on. So what you see here are images from an old farm shop that we have across the street from us. And that was a family-owned property that June and I decided to revamp. Initially, the revamping of this place was just for our family to gather on a good old Louisiana Saturday night, right? So like one of the things that our aunts and our uncles, grandparents and parents told us was that the farm shop was a gathering space during segregation. So as Black farmers and Black Americans here in South Louisiana, we had no place to go. And so we developed our own communities and our own little dance halls within our farm shop. And that's what the original intention of this space was. Now it is turning into more of a community center. And what we have done is operated a few gatherings so far that we find are really making a real initiative across the community where we highlight the stories of people like Norbert Ryu and Julian Leonard and just the farmers within our community that haven't necessarily had a voice in the past. And on the steps here of the courthouse you'll see June holding a deed to our home that was foreclosed on. We eventually got that home back.
And I would just like to say that was like one of my best days because our home was foreclosed on, ironically enough, on Sugarcane Festival weekend.
Right.
The weekend where sugarcane farmers are supposed to be celebrating because they finished planting cane and about to start harvesting. So you can imagine, and we built our home right behind my parents' home because, you know, I wanted to take care of them as they got older. So every day, because we moved in when we got foreclosed on, we moved in with my mom. So every day we walk outside, the first thing we see is our house in the back. But to have a sheriff come and say you have 24 hours to get all your belongings out. Actually, we had the whole weekend because they didn't have time to come. But it was just, it was the worst time of our lives when that happened.
Right.
But so when we got the deed for the house back, it was an incredible day.
Right. And you know, we tell people that our struggles through healing and trying to make a better way for ourselves and others is how we overcome our adversity. And, you know, we know particularly we are targeted and retaliated against. And it's about doing things like revamping the farm shop, sharing our story, letting folks know some of the ways that they can become activated and advocate for people like us is what we enjoy and what we cherish doing. And you could go to the next slide and we'll close this out so that we can get to any questions that are out there. So you could join us by supporting us by making a donation to the Provost Farm Heritage Center.org. There is the website and the QR code, and also by visiting Provost Farm LLC. And you can keep up to date as to what we're doing and some of the events we'll be hosting. And we thank you all for allowing us to be here. We look forward to answering some of your questions and getting started with the discussion.
Thank you both so much. And yes, I see an ask here to put the links in the chat. We'll make sure that we do that for sure. And so, as you know, a lot of our audience here today are educators, they're teachers, and from our work with the 1619 Education Network, and seeing the ways the teachers utilize the resources related to your podcast episode and the story that you told, that's resonating with teachers and students across the country, multidisciplinary context. And we're wondering how you think about the importance of telling these stories of Black farming, land ownership, and land stewardship in that context. What do you want young people and their teachers to know and to be thinking about when they engage with your story in that episode?
Wow, that is I mean, that question deserves so many answers, but I think the primary thing is that what we are wanting is for agriculture to be used as a tool of education in terms of teaching the history of slavery and Jim Crow, but using it also as a tool to get folks involved, especially young students of color, to get them more involved in the industry itself, you know? And I think by opening up the horizon to allowing folks to learn and understand what it actually means to be a farmer in the US, I think can create pathways of wealth and equity for us in a way that changes policy and law, right? And also gives a voice to the voiceless, to those who are quote unquote socially disadvantaged.
And I'm really big on trying to get the next generation, which I know some would say, well, why would you want me to get into it with all the troubles you have? That's a valid question. But you know, we have to fight. We have to keep going. And I want kids to experience like a tractor. It's like an office. I mean, you have 3 computers in these tractors. You have radio, air conditioning, heater. I mean, it's an office on wheels. It really is. I mean, when I lost the 5,000 acre farm, you know, the first thing we did, we actually planted a little garden outside. So, and I just want everybody to experience planting a seed and watch what that seed can grow into. And I always say, when we plant sugarcane, that is like the future there. That is my hope, my dream. You're going to see what you planted, what it's going to make. And it's just a beautiful feeling.
I'll give you an example of when the podcast came out, many of our cohorts texted us, called us and said, can you contact Nicole Hannah Jones and tell her to do a podcast on Black farming? And I was like, well, you guys, I think you're missing the point, because I think the whole 1619 project is an agricultural podcast. When Nicole opens up the podcast itself, the first thing that she tells you is her family's history in sharecropping. And so we often think of the history of sharecropping as us working for other people, and we're not acknowledging the fact that we have built an economy for this entire country based off of growing crops. And so one of the things that we often say is that if you look at it through the lens of what we deserve and not what you perceive it to be, then we think we could get more people involved in understanding what it means to be a Black farmer and understanding our struggles and issues.
Yeah, I really appreciate that framing, because I do think it is difficult for some Black people in the United States to think about this history of sharecropping, or as we talked about, you know, bringing farming back to folks and folks trying to manage the associations that they've been made to have with it. And, you know, do you have any advice for students, teachers, Black people in general, that I don't think it's what you're talking about is not like a dissociating the sharecropping, but it's understanding that history in a different way. Like, what does that process look like? I guess speaking to the healing of the wounds piece.
Right. And I think it's important for teachers and educators to acknowledge the traumatic history. But I think it's also important for us to acknowledge what we could do if we were given proper reparations in terms of being taught and monetary values to our farms and our livelihoods. I think one of the like just first steps that teachers can do is take their students out to a farm. or out to a farm convention where students can get in the tractors, where they can see the highly mechanized equipment that's there, understanding that a tractor is probably the best office in the world, right? And also speaking to farm owners and landowners in terms of understanding what farm ownership and land ownership brings. Because a lot of times what you will hear is that, well, farming is not it's a very risky business. But when you're an entrepreneur, most things that you do are risky, right? But we cannot stress the significance enough of what agriculture is to this country and how it's built our economy. And I think it's important for teachers to be able to express that to students so that they understand that this could be a pathway for a career or an education outlet for, one as a student or one as a teacher, just letting folks know that, the next generation of young students deserve the right and equal and fair access to farming.
And how agriculture is tied to everything from the desk they're sitting on, from the clothes they wear, all that is part of agriculture.
Exactly. When you're in line in the cafeteria and you're eating your food and all of that stuff, and if you want to live a full and healthy life, become involved in agriculture. And I think that's what teachers should start teaching to students. That is very important.
Yeah. You're reminding me of the moment in the video where you spoke to not wanting to tear the system down, but wanting it to work better for everyone. And I'm curious for both of you, if you can just take a moment to share a bit of a freedom dream with us. What does that better system look like to you? Like what is the vision that you have looking forward that you could share, with a young person who is interested in this work?
Well, I think a goal setting for June and me, and this was one of the reasons why we started the nonprofit, was that we wanted to see more young Black students, the next generation, coming into the industry. There was recently an article published last week by The Guardian saying that we have lost 8% of the Black farming population. And if you know our numbers are dwindling to a point where it's not feasible for us to continue if we don't change things. And so I think our goal is that we encourage the next generation and we do it in an honest, open way. And the best way to do that is to acknowledge the past and to really have folks understand what it means to move forward in the future with fair and equal access to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I always said I didn't want any special treatment. I just wanted to be treated equally. And that's something I can't keep saying enough. We just want to be treated equally. And that's what I'm hoping for the future. We can be treated equally where everybody has a fighting chance. Because, I felt like when you always say the American dream, you can be whatever you wanted to be. Well, I worked hard. I did everything I was supposed to do, but it wasn't enough. I won awards, but it wasn't enough. Just for the simple fact, for the color of my skin, I shouldn't be there. And that's something we have to change.
And it's something, I think that developing a lesson plan for teaching kids about agriculture, or just the fact that when you're teaching history in general, like these are for our history teachers out there. Just to give you a bit of background for us, I mean, as Black Americans, we have some of the most diverse, interesting history in this country, June's roots come from the enslaver and the enslaved. Both of ours do, right? And we can tell you, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, we see the difference in those of us with more Black ancestry versus those of us with white ancestry, from the same properties, how we were divided up, what outcomes we were given, and how the federal government treats us in general. And so those are some key things that I think have been missing in the history telling as well, like the relation between us and exactly what sets us apart. And also for those who are benefiting off the backs of us. And so, you know, our goal in the future is just so that we can acknowledge that and move forward and garner like the next group of young people into the industry itself. Because farming is more than just about growing crops. It's about, like June was saying, it's about from the clothes on your back, you know, it's about all of these things that encompass our daily lives. And that's important, very important to teach.
Yeah. It brings me to one of the questions from our audience members, from John, who's saying, you know, U.S. government farming policy at both the federal and local level, there is a story of great missed opportunities for uplift and support. And his question is, what is happening now at those levels that we should be more aware of? What's happening at these, you know, federal and local levels with farming that we can know, we can uplift, we can take into their classrooms, you know, next week?
So one of the things I think that's happening right now in terms of the movement is that a like a group of us as Black farmers all got together during election season in 2016. Yes. And so we were able to persuade lawmakers to come up with some what we thought were social justice acts. It started with the American Rescue Plan.
It was 2020.
2020,
Yeah.
yes, 2020. So it started with the American Rescue Plan. That was thrown under the bus by litigation. And then with the Inflation Reduction Act, which we have to give credit to Senator Booker and Senator Warnock for passing through Congress. Parts of that legislation include financial assistance if you can prove that you've been discriminated against. And another part of it is payments for forgiveness of debt, similar to the payments of forgiveness of student loans. And one of the things that tends to happen, I think, though, is that when we are given resources such as these, people within the institutions find a way to take it away from us, meaning our money is not protected. And for us, that is a part of the repertory system we'd like to see, is the fact that we educate our communities on how folks are trying to take from us, right? And take from society and not benefiting anyone, especially folks like us. And so, you know, that's one of the things that's happening now in terms of policy and policy initiatives.
But getting back to national and like local offices, there's a huge disconnect. I know you might have seen our expressions when you asked how is it going today. I mean, we're still fighting the same things from the Pickford lawsuit from 1999. We're still fighting those same things. You know, at the local office, you know, you're having people that's making decisions that are friends with other farmers. And how can that be fair if they're really good friends in small communities? And here you have a Black farmer who has all these acres. What you think is going to happen in that local office? So it's a huge disconnect, and things have never changed. You know, you can put a Band-Aid on it, but you're not solving the problem. So we're still facing the same issues, if not worse, from 1999 and before.
Rosalind from our audience wants to first just thank you for the amazing, like, sharing your story. And she asked, you're in Louisiana. Are there similar stories in nearby states, or have you maybe connected with farmers, you know, doing this work in nearby states?
We certainly have. So we have a great deal of cohorts around the country. We are even friends with Timothy Pickford, who was the lead claimant in Pickford v. Glickman, the largest civil rights settlement in U.S. history. I recommend that is a teaching point. If you look up that lawsuit, learn it and study it, I think that is a great teaching point to understand the plight of Black farmers and understand the significance of agriculture. And so we have a great deal of help and assistance throughout the country with other Black farmers, other just activism and active advocates around.
And you would be surprised. I mean, it wasn't easy for us to come out and say, you know, okay, I lost my farm. I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, you've been doing this all your life. It's your family's legacy. And to say you lost the farm, it's not easy to come out and say. But, you know, now since we said that, you have so many just in the local community, people who never spoke out, who just, maybe they had to do it because they had kids. They had to go and find jobs. You know, we didn't have any kids. So, you know, when we say we went 2 to 3 weeks without being able to buy a loaf of bread, it was the truth. But you have so many farmers are speaking out and say, you know, my story is similar to yours. I mean, and which is true. I mean, it's throughout the country, people have contacted us and when I say that I contemplated suicide, I really did, but there was one farmer who came to say, I think you saved my life. So and that's not something easy to say to the public, but if it saved that one life, it was worthwhile. Right. So it's speaking actually did help a lot of people. I mean, yeah, it's healing for us and it's healing for other Black farmers who went through the same thing.
We have, just to provide an example of learning and healing and disclosing your story or sharing your story. So at that farm shop, we've had 2 farmers meetings. And at those farmers meetings, we were reaching out to farmers of color locally. And we teamed up with an organization called Rural Coalition. And what we did was give them information about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the financial assistance that's there and how you can protect any resources that you may receive from the Inflation Reduction Act. That was all well and good, and that was the technical assistance that we provided for those 2 meetings. But what we got out of it more was gathering a group of 30 to 40 individuals who had not been in the same room in over 20 to 30 years. And being able to highlight and share their stories in an exhibit. So we did a multi-level learning program where we did, family pictures, community resources. We pulled meal records and signs and all these things, archival material that we showed at these two meetings, and it gave folks a sense of pride. Even while we are going through such difficult times, it gave everyone a sense of pride. And that was the healing part about this, is that if you can teach the story, tell the story, and acknowledge the people around the story, I think that is a pathway towards real change and real education.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It speaks to some of the community aspects you were talking to before. And there are a few folks who are thinking about farming communities in other places like the Midwest. It sounds like that is a model that they could utilize as well. But then we also have a question here from an educator who teaches in a city, in an urban setting, and is asking, for those of us that have little to no farming knowledge or experience, but want to be a part of this, right? What are the recommendations? Is it just starting the small garden? Do we go big or buy land, or what resources would you recommend for teachers that are working with students in those settings?
Start a small garden, learn how plants grow, learn the zone that you're in, because there's individual zones around the country where your planting recommendations are given by your ag center or by FSA or the USDA. Starting a small garden is so important, especially in an urban setting, because it reconnects people to the land and our roots, figuratively and literally. And so I definitely recommend starting a small garden.
Yeah, I would say that over and over and over. I mean, I actually built some 4x8 raised beds for us and just put like some topsoil in there. And that's like the perfect way to start with your kids. And look, we are open. If you ever needed me to get on the phone with you guys, I am all for it. But just something simple like that, and planting a seed, and you watch your students just look at that, and I'm telling you, it's amazing. It's the greatest feeling.
It is, and it directs your energy into a place where you can actually see things grow. And I think that is something that was taken away from us as Black farmers, or is trying to be taken away, right? Is the fact for us to be able to create meaning creating our farms, our crops, but creating community. And so I think that like getting your hands in the dirt and getting involved in learning how things grow is very important.
And for our last question here, it's two-part. So one is a question about what keeps you pursuing justice, like what keeps you sort of focused on this pursuit. But then also I want to ask about what sustains you in the work, because we know from what you shared that that pursuit is not an easy one.
Let's see, what sustains, first of all, God, family, community, and people like you all. Um, you can see the pictures. We are legacy farmers, and we are so tied to our family roots that I can't say enough of how family support keeps us going, and also being able to share our story in places like this. It's immensely important to us.
I mean, for me, it's to keep my family's legacy going. I mean, it's nothing more powerful if you walk in a field that your grandfather or great grandfather walked in as well. That is powerful. I mean, my dad was my hero. He was my best friend, and I lost him in 2008. But to see him in the tractor, something that he loved doing as a little boy, and he passed that on to me and my brothers. So I will never, they can try to take away my farm all they want. I will never let that happen. I mean, I'm going to fight until I can't fight anymore, but it's to keep that family's legacy alive and to try to give a voice to the voiceless. We were fortunate enough to be out in the public with stories. So a lot of people don't get that opportunity. So we're just going to keep fighting until we make a change. We have to.
And each other. We lean on each other a great deal. June is my best friend. And I think that, we were put together to really be able to make some moves with our story and share our experience. So
yeah. When it was down to my worst, I mean, she was like, open those blinds, like, because I'm an outdoorsy person. I want to be out, in 6 o'clock in the morning. But when I was at my lowest, I was still in the house at 1 o'clock, until she told me, no, you got to get out of it. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here today.
right.
I appreciate you both so much for sharing your story with us. I hope you see these, like the comments and the affirmation in the chat from everyone that is here. And I know that Kendra has also been sharing some of the teacher units that have touched on these themes of whether it's agriculture, climate justice, right? And teaching the students again about how this work and that ancestry is being stripped away, and all of those themes are in our guide. This was such an incredible and generative conversation. Thank you to the audience for your amazing questions. We hope that you all enjoyed the first day of our 1619 Education Conference and that you will join us again tomorrow afternoon. We have an incredible lineup of speakers tomorrow as well, including notable historians from the 1619 docuseries. We'll be sharing information about a new funding opportunity for educators who want to engage with the 1619 Project in their work during our remarks at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. And in the meantime, we are encouraging you to share your learning and takeaways from this panel. You can use the hashtag Teaching1619 or tag Pulitzer Center on social media to be able to connect with us and the other attendees and participants. And I will share again the links that June and Angie shared for supporting Provost Farm. We also note that this work that we do with educators would not be possible without our incredible community of donors. And if you'd like to consider supporting Pulitzer Center and our mission as well, you can visit pulitzercenter.org/give. So thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you guys, and
Thank
reach
you,
out to us
everyone.
if y'all need anything. Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all
Thank y'all so
so
much.
much.